right, so, ready to take a deep dive. Today we're tackling Gene Hackman, one of Hollywood's true enigmas.
Definitely enigmatic.
Yeah, and we're going beyond the typical, greatest hits bio,
Right.
We're digging into this question that's always surrounded him.
Yeah.
How can someone be so talented and, well, kind of a pain?
Yeah.
Our guide for this is a piece called Gene Hackman, the indomitable icon of Hollywood.
Catchy title.
Right. So where do we even start with this guy?
Well, I think to get him, you got to go back to the beginning. His childhood, man, it was rough. Divorced parents, always moving. That kind of stuff sticks with you.
The article mentions finding escape in movies. Makes sense, right? Given, well, his whole career.
Oh, totally. But then he lies about his age to join the Marines at 16.
That's not exactly the path to Hollywood you'd expect.
No, not really. And I think that's where we see this kind of tension, inner turmoil, but also this drive to prove himself.
Because he gets discharged, right? Health reasons.
Exactly. And that probably just fueled the insecurity.
So he's got to prove himself. And prove himself he does. Off to New York City, determined to be an actor. Imagine. Juggling all these odd jobs, studying at Pasadena Playhouse.
Wait, wasn't that where?
Oh, and get this.
Yeah.
Both him and Dustin Hoffman considered unpromising by their teachers.
Wow. Talk about missing the mark.
Right, but it shows you something about Hackman. He didn't care what anyone else thought, just kept going.
Clear grit.
First big break, Broadway, 1964, Any Wednesday. But then, boom, Bonnie and Clyde, 67.
Oh yeah, Buck Barrow.
Steals every scene. Suddenly, this intense new guy, everyone's buzzing.
But even with all that success, the self-doubt stuck around. He was so hard on himself, almost like obsessively so.
Makes you wonder if that perfectionism, that fear of failing, maybe that fed into the difficult reputation.
Could be. That need to control everything, get it just right. It often comes from insecurity, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had moments in my own life where that fear of not being good enough, let's just say I wasn't always a joy to be around.
We've all been there.
And then 1971, The French Connection. It's the role for him. Jimmy Popeye Doyle. So intense, so raw, it wins him the Oscar.
And it wasn't just playing the role, right? He became Popeye Doyle.
The article talks about that, his acting style. Totally immersive, he disappeared into these characters.
The essence of method acting. But man, it can take a toll. Hackman himself said playing Doyle left him drained, like he was struggling to separate himself from the character.
Wow. So even with awards, that intensity has got to leave a mark. You're blurring the lines between yourself and this, well, often pretty dark character. Where does the role end and the real person begin?
And that's where I think the personal struggles, the talent, it all starts to connect. You're pouring yourself into these roles. It's captivating, but maybe destructive too. It's like all that turmoil, he poured it into something powerful, something artistic, but kind of dangerous too, like walking a tightrope. And it sounds like that spilled over into his personal life too.
His marriage, right, to Faye Maltese. The article mentions kids, 3 of them, but divorce in '86.
Yeah, and not a clean break either, from what I gather. Infidelity, the pressure of being a star, Hackman's own depression. It's heavy stuff.
Makes you think, how much of that darkness in his roles, that intensity, came from his real life?
It's hard to separate, honestly. Artists, they're like sponges. They soak up everything around them, and it comes out in the work, whether they mean it to or not.
So even playing these tough guys, complex characters, he's got his own battles off screen too.
For sure. And that's something to remember. Success, it doesn't just erase those inner struggles. Even someone who seems to have it all, they can be fighting like hell inside.
Which makes his retirement in 2001 even more wild, right? Top of his game, and poof, he's gone.
Totally. Shocked everyone. People were coming up with all these theories, health issues, studio fights, you name it.
But Hackman, he insisted it was family and writing. He always loved to write, even published some novels.
Shows a lot of self-awareness, I think. Like maybe that tightrope act was too much. Maybe he needed to step back from the intensity, that constant pressure to perform.
I've had those moments myself. Thinking about a big change, walking away from something that wasn't working, even if it looked good from the outside, it takes guts to do that, especially when you're as successful as Hackman was.
Oh, absolutely. It's like saying, screw the usual idea of success, my own well-being matters more. Powerful message, especially these days when everyone's so focused on achievements.
So he steps away from acting, but embraces this other creative side.
Yeah.
Writing. Did his novels have similar themes to his films?
And that's where it gets interesting. His characters, they're often facing these tough choices, wrestling with their own flaws. Like, he's still exploring those same ideas, just in a different way.
So even in retirement, he's working through those big questions about, human nature, what we all struggle with.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes his work, both on screen and the page, so powerful. He doesn't shy away from the messy stuff, the complicated parts of life. He forces us to confront them too.
We've covered a lot. His tough childhood, that intense acting, personal demons, the retirement shocker. But we can't wrap up without talking about some of those iconic roles.
Right. We mentioned the French Connection, but Unforgiven? Wow. Little Bill Daggett, chilling performance, second Oscar. Talk about mastering those morally gray characters.
And the Royal Tenenbaums, he's this eccentric father trying to reconnect with his totally dysfunctional family. Hilarious and heartbreaking all at once. He just nailed it.
He could bring so much depth to every role, even smaller parts. You could empathize with the villain, question the hero's motives. He made you think.
That's why he's so captivating. With Hackman, you never knew what you'd get, but it was always going to be brilliant.
It's a good reminder, though, even the best have their missteps. The article mentioned a couple that didn't quite land.
Yeah.
Eureka and Twilight.
Twilight, huh? That one probably makes some best of lists. But not for the reasons you'd want.
Part of being an artist, right? You take chances, experiment, and sometimes it just doesn't work. The important thing is to learn from it and keep pushing forward.
Sadly, Hackman's journey ended earlier this year. He passed away at 95.
A huge loss for film, for sure. He left behind an incredible legacy, though, a body of work that will keep inspiring us for years to come.
His death was even more heartbreaking because his wife, Betsy Arakawa, she passed away just days before from the same virus. And with his Alzheimer's, it seems Hackman wasn't even aware she was gone.
It's a really sad ending to a life that was so full of, well, these amazing highs and these really deep lows. Brings us back to that first question. How do we square the immense talent with the personal flaws?
That's a question that's really stuck with me throughout this whole deep dive.
The answer might be in realizing that greatness doesn't mean being perfect. It's about the impact you have, the stories you tell, the way you touch people's lives.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? What stories do you want to tell? And how are you going to face those challenges, those triumphs that come with chasing your passions?
Man, it feels like we just scratched the surface with Gene Hackman. There's so much more to him than, those great performances, like all those stories about what he was like off screen.
That's what makes him so interesting, right? You can't put him in a box.
Yeah.
Brilliant actor, definitely, but also a human being, flaws and all.
We talked about those clashes with directors, how he had this reputation for being, demanding. Was that all just part of, his creative process? Or was it something more?
Tough question. I mean, some people would say that intensity, that need to get his vision out there, that's what made him so good. But yeah, it rubs some people the wrong way.
It makes you think, where's the line? Can you just excuse bad behavior because someone's talented?
It's a bigger question than just Gene Hackman, right? It's like a societal thing. How do we hold artists accountable for what they do, but still, appreciate their art? I guess we want our heroes to be perfect, but they're not. They're just as messed up as the rest of us. Maybe even more so because of all the emotional stuff they have to deal with for their work.
And maybe that's what makes them so relatable. We see ourselves in their struggles. It's like, oh, it's okay to not have it all figured out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hackman's whole life, it's like proof that you can do amazing things even when you're, battling your own demons.
Exactly. And that's something we can all learn from, I think. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. Embracing all of who you are, the good and the bad.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into Gene Hackman, I'm walking away with, a lot of respect for the guy behind those performances. He was a true original. His story shows that even when things are tough, you can still create something incredible.
And maybe that's the best legacy, right? Inspiring others to follow their passions, to be themselves, to go for greatness. Knowing that perfection is a myth, but being real, that's what matters.